Julia, I'm going to hand straight over to you to jump in. So there we go.
Oh, I don't even know.
Hi. Just nod a bit at me, Emma, if you can hear me okay. Yeah, excellent. Then I shall plough straight in. Thank you and good morning. And I'm impressed that this many people are prepared to hear something that's entitled Policy Anything at this time of the morning. So thank you. My name is Julia Yong. I was a civil servant for about 20 years. I've been an independent consultant for about, I think, 2.5 now. So a recovering civil servant. I have mainly worked in children's social care policy in my time in government. But actually, my expertise is in transformation and change, which is why inevitably the last couple of years of my life have been spent mostly working on AI, where I was delighted to meet actually lots of the speakers on this call, but particularly Emma earlier this year, talking to councils about similar things. So today I want to talk about policy graveyards, which is one of those phrases I never have to explain to people because we all know what a policy graveyard is because we all have them. And what we like to do at AI is figure out ways to make people's day-to-day practice in whatever profession they're in easier and better quality. So we are going to talk about how you avoid having all of your beautifully crafted policies and guidance stuck in a graveyard. So when I talk about policies, and we all have many, many of them in our organisations, lots of us will have written them. A lot of us, well, I have certain.
Ringo or any of them. Why not?
Someone needs to
if
mute,
we could just
I think.
if we could just make sure people are on mute if they're not talking. I think we've got a bit of background noise.
Was it just at Croydon Hospital? Was it just at the Croydon Hospital?
I'll just wait till that's resolved. Hold on. Okay, I think we're there. Thank you. Cool. So policies. Lots of us have written them. Lots of us, certainly I have in my time in government, contributed to them or been the person who they're stuck with while you're waiting to comment on them or approve them. The current state of people's AI policies is a good reflection of what happens to policy making and policy kind of creation and deployment in practice. So what's happening right now in organizations is people are using AI pretty much en masse. It was like half a year ago, we're now at 80% by most surveys. What you've now got is organizations sometimes scrambling to get them in place, slightly lagging behind the reality of people using AI, but trying to keep people and their use of AI safe and ethical and the right side of legal, but people know they're in a catch-up space, which quite often happens at the early stage of when you realize you need a policy for a thing. In the meantime, people are developing habits, both good and bad. And once a policy is created and agreed, what you tend to have in organizations in your kind of next phase of policy maturity is there will be a burst of communications when you've got a new policy and you want to tell everyone all about it and you want everyone to follow it. After that, the policy becomes hard to find. And in reality, what happens is people will find out what they need to do by doing the thing they did before and hoping that's right, or by asking a friend. If they're really desperate, probably if they think something's already gone wrong, they might go back and look for the policy. Can we move on to the next slide? Now, what we think happens in reality is all completely reasonable. Policies are never written to be unhelpful. Policies are always, in every single situation, are written to be right and helpful. That's the nice thing about policies, which is probably how I stuck out government for 20 years. But they are written sometimes more with compliance in mind than kind of guidance, because it's a policy, it's not necessarily your guidebook. They are generally written in a way that's not able to apply easily to any given situation. Things can be written in a way that are abstract, designed to apply to everyone in every situation. And that sort of makes them both super helpful and kind of unhelpful at the same time. But obviously the third problem is how difficult they are to find. And actually they're difficult in two ways. So one is that they might be online or in SharePoint folders or generally buried. The other thing is that even if you can find the one policy that applies, the thing that is very hard to do in complex situations, which is where most people on this call will work, is actually you know that there's probably 3, 4, 5 bits of different policy guidance legislation that apply. And when you start to find the first answer, you are not necessarily going to find and apply every piece of guidance and policy that you want to apply to it. And what you get, therefore, is a risk that people are doing anything that's not best practice or that is not compliant, or you're getting variability in the system. And we know that matters particularly for practitioners working in places like social care, which is an area I spend a lot of time, but actually applies to anyone working in any role. What you want is to make great practice the default. If you don't mind moving on to the next slide, please. So what we want to happen in practice is to have your policies embedded in guidance that is like your best ever manager or that colleague. We all have one colleague, or in every organisation will have had one colleague who has really good corporate knowledge and is very good at explaining things. Now, what you tend to do is find that person, which is always a bit awkward if they're out or in a meeting. But what you want is for your guidance to work like that. You want it to be explainable to you in your situation, in your language, in the way you want it, and actually in a conversation that helps you figure out how it applies to the particular situation you're in that is always unique to you. And that is where AI can therefore make a massive difference, because obviously what the 80% of people who are using AI in their day-to-day work, sanctioned or unsanctioned, what we know is happening is that that is working because it is so easy and good to use for you. AI is incredibly good at language, so it's very good at responding to your specific question. There are other risks with it, as we've just been talking about with Sally, but in the meantime, the reason people are drawn to it is because it's nice and explainable and easy, and therefore helps you in the moment in a really quick and easy way. So AI has lots of potential in this space. But we're going to move on to the next slide because we are going to talk a little bit about the risk. And I know this is a slightly technical slide. Don't worry about it. You don't actually need to understand this. Shelley was talking a bit about agents and the need for governance, which is all critically important. What we think is that there is one really straightforward way to manage a lot of the risk around AI. First of all, understand what AI is doing. When you talk about AI in the sense of generative AI, things like ChatGPT, but also Copilot and other stuff, one of the things that's happening is that it's very easy to confuse it with a database because it's serving you information. It's not really a database, it's a big probability machine. So what it's done is absorb a huge amount of information, and at any given time is plugged into an enormous amount of information, including the entirety of the internet. And it has been trained to give you the answer that is most likely to make you happy, essentially. So it is doing a very clever and very impressive thing. And this is the big leap we've seen of mapping words and phrases or images and documents, and then being able to reassemble them in response to your query. And that is phenomenal. But that is obviously why it makes mistakes. So if you think of something like ChatGPT, you can literally ask it to tell you everything it knows about cats. And what it gives you is not everything it knows about cats, because that would crash your computer and possibly the internet. What it does is kind of go, what she really wanted was probably about this information of about this type. And because it's very good at doing that, it means it's also selecting information, can get things a bit wrong, might not give you exactly what you needed. And it's a little bit best guess, but it's an extremely compelling best guess, including when it lies to your face. Now, one of the ways you can resolve this is something called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. And I am sorry for the technical term, but I promise it's important and worth caring about. And essentially that is when, instead of allowing your AI to essentially roam free and assemble things on its own, plug it into a set of information that you want it to look at. Copilot can do this to some extent. There are simpler ways of doing it. This also slightly manages, someone mentioned in the chat, the risk of sort of heavy energy use, which is a risk with a lot of AI. There it is fairly heavy on the energy use. One of the ways you can help manage that is to sort of right size your deployment of things. Get tools that are the right size for the job you need it to do, not something that is plugged into the entirety of the internet so that you can find a name of a thing, for example. So if we just move on to the next slide. What I think the simplest way for me to do this, if Emma doesn't mind, is to show you one. So if you don't mind clicking the link, Emma. So what we do is we take essentially the front end of things like ChatGPT, and you have therefore all of that amazing technology that is very good at answering your questions in your language. Also use Cloud and Anthropic through AWS, other systems are available. But what we tend to do is take any really good technology, but isolate it and train it on a piece of information. The first one we built for council, I think, was the one we built, in fact, for Kath and some of her teams in North Yorkshire, which was trained on all of their social care, children's social care policy, guidance and everything else, in order to let social workers be able to essentially have a conversation with their policy and guidance. This one was built for Moving On Up, who are awesome. We like Moving On Up. You'd like them. Look them up if you don't know them. They are about getting more care leavers into apprenticeships, which is an incredibly good idea, and everyone should be doing more of it. You do love policy. Polly is a very popular tool. So this is the Moving On Apprenticeship Buddy, which is freely available, although it's not massively used. It's used by people with a particular interest, and that is employers who are considering getting apprentices and care leavers who are looking for apprenticeships. But if you don't mind typing in a simple question like, I'm 19, I was in care, what help can I get with an apprenticeship? And we'll see what it does. It doesn't have to be particularly well written, which is good because we're all now really meanly watching Emma type. And we know that as soon as you watch someone type, they can't type properly. That is the rule of typing while being supervised. Now, what it's doing is using a sort of large language model on the front end. So it's all nice and friendly and chatty, like your ChatGPT free online. But what it's doing is only looking at the information we've told it to look at. So it was giving extremely accurate answers to only the question it was asked. And there's a couple of clever things about these sorts of solutions. And you'll see through there are notes and references. So it's very easy now to look at actually the 4 different pieces of guidance that apply, not one. Now, your normal care leaver is not going to have found 4 different gov.uk sources and the right bits of those sources and had it explained. But they're all there and it can now dig into them in the right way. The other thing you can do, Emma, if you don't mind just typing, could you explain that more simply and see what it does? And this is one of the things that we found is a benefit, because what you've now got is you've managed the risk of hallucination. So it's not making up answers or drawing information from the Australian government apprenticeship site, for example, or other places we've seen information drawn from. It is drawing it from the information we pointed it at. And it is explaining it in the way the user wants it explained, because it's as able to do that as any other awesome online AI tool. You can also have fun asking it to say, would you mind telling me in French? Or can you, I think it's, yeah, can you tell me in French? I think is how I phrased it earlier. So that might work too, if you don't mind trying that, Emma. Because that's the other thing, is it can serve things up in different languages. Worked out this, I'm hoping it was, there you go, have it in French. I asked for it in French because I know if it's wrong in French, and that's the only other language I speak, sorry. But I promise you that is about right. So that's the sort of thing. And if I show you the tool, it's easy for you to understand what it's doing. But what you can see is essentially a tool that looks and feels like a sort of ChatGPT type tool, or like some of your Copilot chats. But what it's doing is much more neatly trained on a single job. And that's because it has its repository of data, and it has a layer of training that says you are an advisor to these kinds of people on this topic. And being able to make that really neat and explainable and safe and secure is what enables you to manage a lot of those risks, we think. These are very neat and tidy tools. If you don't mind going back to the slides, Emma, sorry, I feel like I'm being very kind of directed to poor Emma. So yes, on the next...
You're all good, Julia, no worries.
Is that all right? Thank you. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide, actually. Oh, now that's that one. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I will, and I'm trying to wrap this up early to help you get back on time. So there's 3 things that we think you can do. Get from a situation where your policy graveyard stops being a filing system that is hopefully read this, probably won't read this, probably won't follow it, to being able to ask this, but to do it in a way that is secure, that is reliable, that is all locked down to your systems, all that kind of stuff. That is why I want you to care about RAG and to care about the use cases around policies, because I think that is how you can unlock best practice and best performance in your teams. Not have people spend time looking for stuff, or worse, not spend time looking for it and therefore maybe doing the wrong thing, but to make it very, very easy and essentially the default to find good information quickly that works for you in your language. And that is why I think this kind of AI is so interesting. Getting people really from static documents to learning systems. And it's worth just mentioning what we also see with some of these solutions is because once you have your guidance in any kind of model like this, you can also do things like generate me some training materials, generate me some quizzes, generate me summaries for this email, explain it to an 8-year-old. All of these kinds of uses become very, very possible, but in a slightly neat and tidy way that hopefully manages those risks. I'm actually going to wrap up there to hope you guys get back on time, hopefully. I'm 4 minutes over, but I think I've clawed a bit back for you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Julia. Do you want people to scan this QR code at all?
Please
quickly?
do. You can find me, and my colleague Kieran White is on the call, who's one of the founders of Leading AI. You can find either of us pretty easily, or you can find the company. But what you will find there is We're not really big into sales pitches. What we do like doing is talking about case studies, because what we think actually is really valuable to people is thinking about all of your use cases, whether that's with us or other people, but think about the really good use cases for AI, so it's used in a way that can really unlock good practice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julia. That was really, really wonderful to hear. And as Julia said, we've been chatting a little bit. So yes, I'm sure we will continue, to work together. And it's great that you've been able to a bit more. Anybody is interested in finding out any more about these kind of tools, reach out to Julia. And as I say, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to come and do a little kind of demo and talk about the art of the possible with colleagues.